Free Japan Channel number 66. Today, March 18th, 2025. The time is 6 p.m. Dear listeners, good evening. Here in Yokohama, Tuesday night is beginning to spread over the city. Tonight's FGC topic is the fiscal policy of Korekiyo Takahashi. Perhaps you don't know the name of Korekiyo Takahashi. Takahashi is one of the most eminent financial ministers here in Japan. In modern Japanese history, Takahashi was the most prominent financiers. He also served as a banker and top banker of Central Bank, Nippon Bank, and after that, he served as financial minister several times, perhaps 5 times, 6 times. So he was the most frequently appearing financial minister in Japanese modern history. In his history of Takahashi, the most famous and most distinguished era was the 1930s. It was Inukai cabinet. And Takahashi was nominated as financial minister at that time. It was 1931, December, therefore at the end of 1931. As you know, 1929, in December, New York stock price rapidly fell. And the so-called Great Depression attacked the economy of all over the world. Japanese economy was also not exempt from this aftermath of the Great Depression. And in 1930, in 1931, Japanese economy was at the bottom. Inukai cabinet started under this condition, and Prime Minister Inukai appointed Korekiyo Takahashi as a financial minister because it was only Takahashi who could overcome the difficulty of Japanese economy at the time. At the time, Takahashi was already a very old man, and he didn't want to be financial minister again because it was such an important and influential part of the cabinet. Therefore, Takahashi himself didn't think that he could fulfill the role of financial minister. However, Tsuyoshi Inukai, the prime minister at the time, so pleaded several times to Takahashi, and finally Takahashi accepted to become a financial minister in Inukai cabinet. So virtually Inukai cabinet started in 1932 because the start of this cabinet was in December. Therefore, the virtual start, so virtually the start was 1932 in January. And tonight's theme, the fiscal policy of Takahashi. So this fiscal policy of 1932, which Takahashi did, was really relic of financial achievement, not only in Japanese history, but also in the world history, in my opinion. As I said, Japanese economy was at the bottom. under the influence of the Great Depression from the New York City. And Takahashi, as the financial minister, issued so much national bond. And he ordered the bureaucrats of Central Bank, the Nippon Bank, to buy all of this national bond, which the financial minister issued. Then the money from Central Bank could go to government, and the government implemented so many huge public sector investment at the time. Especially, it was a militarism era. Therefore, the Japanese government spent the money from Central Bank for the artillery or battleship, airplanes, and so on, for militarism, military purpose. In fact, the military sector is the one that extends to so many fields in the society. For example, in the construction sector, the influence is relatively limited to concrete or to iron or to the material that is needed for the construction or building. Of course, construction company can profit from this public sector investment by the government. However, this construction investment is limited in terms of its effect to the society. Curiously speaking, military sector is the most pervasive influence in the society. Therefore, Takahashi invested the money from the central bank to public sector, especially military sector. At that time, Japan was expanding its influence by militarism. It was unfortunate. However, it was the reality. Japan was a very belligerent country in 1930s, 1940s. Therefore, this Takahashi fiscal policy was welcoming even to army and navy at that time. So, Imperial Army and Imperial Navy could build so many battleships, for example, or airplanes, or torpedo planes, and dive bombers. In 1941, so later, we could see the brilliant attack at Pearl Harbor by Japanese Air Force. The cause of this success can be attributed to Takahashi fiscal policy because Takahashi enabled Imperial Army and Imperial Navy of Japan to expand their realm. However, if you are familiar with the economic activity, you would say that this kind of investment by the government to public sector elicites inflation. Of course, it did. Takahashi was naturally aware of it. At first, financial minister issues the bond, national bond. Then central bank buy the national bond. and giving money to the government. Then the government order some investment to public sector or private company even by this money. Then the money flows across the society. Then it would cause the inflation, of course. Of course, Takahashi knew that. Therefore, it was 1932 that Takahashi fiscal policy started. And 1933, 1934, Japan witnessed huge recovery from the influence of the Great Depression. As a matter of fact, Japan was the country which firstly escaped from the influence of the Great Depression. It was all due to Takahashi fiscal policy. However, if the money remains in the society, it would be the cause of inflation. Takahashi knew that. Therefore, Takahashi tried to withdraw the money from the society in 1935, 1936, because he feared the inflation in Japanese society. However, the officers or soldiers of Army and Navy was very dissatisfied with its withdrawal of money by Takahashi fiscal policy. They profited from Takahashi policy when the government tried to expand the public sector investment, especially to the military sectors. So the officers and soldiers were very glad at this investment of Takahashi policy, fiscal policy. However, when Takahashi tried to withdraw the money from the society because of the fear of inflation, then the soldiers or officers were suddenly discontent with Takahashi policy. In 1936, February 26, here in Japan, the very famous incident or very famous coup d'etat was implemented February 26, 1936. Several important, very important persons in the government were killed, including Korekiyo Takahashi. Why did the officers of this coup d'etat target Takahashi? Because Takahashi tried to withdraw the money from Imperial Army and Imperial Navy. February 26 incident was carried out by the officers and soldiers of Imperial Army. However, the antipathy to Takahashi was also seen in Imperial Navy, of course, because the budget to Navy and Army was shrinking at that time. Looking back from now, Takahashi's fiscal policy was very to the point, rational, and we can be proud of this fiscal policy even now, 2025. John Maynard Keynes published his masterpiece, General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. It was 1936, and what I talked tonight in this FGC broadcasting, the era of Takahashi fiscal policy was from 1932 to 1935 and 1936. We can say that Takahashi did the investment from the government to the public sector without knowing the general theory of Keynes. Takahashi was really a Keynesian without knowing Keynes. This is a marvelous and wonderful achievement of Japanese modern history, wasn't it? Look, here is the importance of Takahashi fiscal policy. However, we Japanese don't teach this epoch-making achievement of Takahashi to students. On the contrary, now, in Japanese education, Takahashi fiscal policy is now being taught like militarism. Of course, the fiscal policy of Takahashi enabled the military expansion. Of course, it did. However, it was because the investment to militarism was the most effective public investment at that time, or even now. And Takahashi tried to withdraw the money from Army and Navy. However, now in the textbook of finance in university, Takahashi is now being taught as the financial minister who paved the way to militarism. I think this is a very, very superficial interpretation of Takahashi fiscal policy. Therefore, tonight, I would like to obliterate this stupid textbook of finance in Japanese education, and I'd like to draw the real portrait of Korekiyo Takahashi, a great financier, which Japan gave birth to in 1930s. Thank you.